I kind of believe that the truth of the world is that humans are the scariest thing.
Hey, hello everyone. Alessandro here again for another video for Area 43. Today I have with me Jon Stevenson. He's the director, producer, editor for Rentapol. That's a great movie. So thank you so much, Jon, for being here today.
I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for having me.
Hey, so let me ask you, man, because we were talking before about Stevenson. That was a short movie you did a while ago. So was that your first experience in producing something?
Yes, we made Stiffs right out of film school, and I actually acted in that movie. So I was in front of the camera the whole time, but I wrote it with a friend of mine who's also named John, and we produced it. We spent all our own money on it, and we went way beyond what we probably should have done just in terms of like the amount of effort we put into it. But it was a really great first experience making a film outside of the film school bubble, because it was just really challenging, and kind of it was like a crash course in biting off more than you can chew. So yeah, it was a really fun movie to make. It's about a girl that it's about these two coroners that go to pick up a dead body, and the girl wakes up in their coroner van, and they're trying to figure out what to do with her the rest of the night. So it's kind of this like buddy comedy. There's not a lot of horror elements to it. But yeah, we finished it, and it got into like one festival in LA a long time ago, and never really went anywhere after that. So I probably have it on a hard drive somewhere around here, but I haven't actually watched it in a long time.
After that, you worked in some other productions, right? But then Rentapol was the first work that you've done that you edited, you wrote it, you directed, you did it all.
Yeah, that was my first feature that I directed. I had written a few others, but they just never got off the ground. And I had started as a cinematographer in film, so I shot a few things. But yeah, it was my first time directing, and it just kind of, the stars aligned where I was writing this script, and it just so happened that the house next door to mine was vacant. It was, this old woman had lived there. She was in her 90s, and she had passed away, and I became friends with her sons. And I was like, hey, can I film a horror movie in your house? And they're like, sure. So I had written a script, and it just so happened to plug in perfectly into this house next door. And a bunch of other serendipitous things happened to where we were able to make the movie for a relatively very small amount of money. And so it was able to come together. It was kind of crazy how it worked out.
In my opinion, the amount of money you put in a movie doesn't determine its quality. You did an amazing work. And to be honest, it's not a lot of movies that cause this kind of feeling, but I actually like David. I liked him from the beginning. He was such a nice guy. I have no idea what happened that made him take this wrong. I mean, I have some ideas, but let me ask you, have you ever considered giving him a second chance?
Thank you, by the way, I'm so glad that you like the movie, and I agree that the money you spend on it does not necessarily equal higher quality. And yeah, it was really important for me that David as a character was sympathetic, because that kind of makes the best villains are people that you can understand why they're doing what they're doing. And he's not really a villain until the end. And we had kind of wrestled a lot with the ending of the movie. Like, where do we go from here once the tape is destroyed and he goes and gets a new copy and he brings it home and he's so relieved? We weren't really sure where to go with it after that. And we were kind of like, yeah, we should just like go full horror film with it, and you know, finally deliver on some of the tension that we've been building the whole time. So I don't know that I ever considered any version of the story where he survived or like broke free of the spell of Andy. I think it was always meant to be sort of a descent into madness.
Did you really mean to make Andy look like someone that was putting a spell on him, or?
Yeah, it's a cool dynamic. You know, anytime you're making a horror movie, I think you want to have some elements in there of paranormal, supernatural. So it was an interesting balance to try to, like, Andy on the tape is very clearly, like you said, it's all David's perspective of what he's watching and how he's kind of warping it in his own mind. but you have to leave a little room for like, is there like a spell that he's casting, or is this tape somehow, holding power over him? But ultimately, by the end, you realize, yeah, it's all just David and his craziness. But the interesting thing is there's a real tape called Rent a Friend, that was made in the 80s. And I came across that tape and I was watching it and I was just like, it was earnestly made for someone who might need a friend, and I was watching it and I was like, man, who would watch this and fall in, like, think that this person is their friend? That's so weird. Who would? And then I kind of took that and ran with it, this idea of like, who would this person be that they bring this tape home and they're like, we're best friends. What kind of background would this person have? What kind of psychology, so it's probably the only person who would ever watch this tape and fall that deep in love with it or whatever. And the story kind of came out of that seed.
If you look at David and his first reactions to the tape, it's like pretty much how many of us would react. And then just as he gets to know how the story progresses on Andy's side, that's when he actually starts to interact more. I don't know if maybe it's because he feels like he's in a controlled space. I love that idea. What I like it the most is that it doesn't really look like a horror movie. I mean, it is horror somehow because perhaps real life is the most scariest thing that has.
Yeah, he definitely was evolving as I was writing the script. And actually, a funny thing happens when you're writing. There is a point in the outline or in the scripting process where, for me, it starts to feel like the story is telling you where to go. And so I start with this nugget of who David might be. He lives alone at home. He's isolated, and no one listens to him. He has a mother that's all of his conversations with his mother are one way because she doesn't know who he is. She's not really listening. He's trying to meet people out in the dating world, and he goes to Video Rendezvous, and Diane's on the phone and she's not listening to him. She's just like, yeah, give me your money. So like you said, he finds the tape initially and he's like, oh, whatever. But then he gets rejected for a date. His mom, her condition is worsening. All these sort of things kind of like force him into, well, this is my only option of something to connect with. And as I was writing, it was kind of like there was this point where the character was sort of telling me more about who he was rather than me inventing it. It's like in Inception when they're talking about you're creating a dream and perceiving it simultaneously. It's like that. It's really interesting.
Can you talk a little bit about if you are more into other horror stories and what direction you want to take on that side?
In terms of genres, horror is one of the most fun to play in for a lot of obvious reasons. But also, when you're an independent filmmaker, it's the best genre to start in because you don't need a movie star necessarily to be in your movie. If you're making a drama or a romantic comedy, like the only way you really can get people to watch is if there's someone in it that they recognize. But with horror, fans are showing up to get scared, and that's the kind of the star of the movie. So as long as you can do that well, then you don't really need a lot of the other frills. And so I always liked horror from that perspective of like it's a perfect way into filmmaking. And for me in particular, I love psychological horror. Just in my personal life, I'm really interested in psychology, the human mind. I kind of believe that the truth of the world is that humans are the scariest thing. They're the most dangerous thing, and what your mind can do is just like it's your whole way of perceiving the world around you. So it can warp things into things that aren't there, that kind of thing. So I really like psychological horror, but I also I'm a big fan of sci-fi horror, like where we start to bring in some of those elements. Rent-a-Pal even has, I have a hard time really calling it horror because it's not that much of a horror film. It's more, the vibe is very uncomfortable and tense, and I think that's what makes you feel like, oh, this is scary. But for me, it was always more of a psychological thriller. But I love that it gets lumped in with horror because there's so many fans of horror. There's so many people who just love that genre. So I feel like very lucky to be embraced by those fans.
Thanks a lot, Jon. It was great talking to you. I loved your work, and I really, really hope to see something from you again.
Thank you so much. I hope so too. Thank you. Yes, I would love to come back with once I have my next one out there, you and I can hopefully chat again afterwards. And yeah, I also, it's interesting with Brazil. There's a lot of fans of Rent-A-Pal, specifically from Brazil. I don't know what it is about, maybe it was the way it was distributed or something, but I hear a lot from people there. So it's really cool that I just really warms my heart that there's so many people out there that actually like this movie. So yeah, thank you so much. And of course, I'd love to come back sometime.